The night of September the 17th, 1989, the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. The 41st Primetime Emmy Awards. The specific quality of the evening. The particular combination of Hollywood formality and television industry, self-congratulation that the Emmy ceremony produces, the gathering of the people who make the thing and the people who watch the thing being made in the same room in the specific context of the industry's formal acknowledgement of its own excellence, was the quality of an evening that was, for the people in attendance, simply an evening of the kind that the industry produces regularly and that the people in the industry attend regularly, and that is, in its regularity, unremarkable in the specific way of the occasions that the regularity produces. Loretta Young walked onto the stage. She was 76 years old. She had been in the entertainment industry for approximately 60 years, which is a duration that no other fact about any person in any industry describes with the same completeness as the duration itself, because 60 years in any professional context is the duration of a life rather than the duration of a career, and 60 years in the specific professional context of the American entertainment industry, which is an industry that disposes of its performers with the regularity and the casual efficiency of an institution that has always understood talent as a resource to be used rather than a person to be maintained, is an achievement of a specific and unusual kind. She was wearing a dress. The dress had been chosen with the care that Loretta Young always brought to the choosing of what she wore in public, which was not the ordinary care of a woman who wants to look well, but the specific, total, professional care of a woman who had understood since she was a teenager in Hollywood in the 1920s that the dress was not simply clothing but communication, that the visual presentation of Loretta Young in a public context was itself a form of performance, as deliberately constructed and as precisely executed as any performance she had given in a film or on a television stage. The audience rose. The standing ovation was the standing ovation of an industry for one of its own, for the specific quality that Loretta Young represented, which was the quality of duration and consistency and the specific form of maintained excellence that the entertainment industry produces rarely enough that when it does produce it, the industry understands that it is looking at something unusual. They were applauding 60 years. She smiled. The smile was the smile that had been one of the most recognizable expressions in American entertainment since the early 1930s. The warm, composed, perfectly maintained quality of grace and approachability that had been her signature across the full duration of the career. It was as complete on this September evening in 1989 as it had been in any of the years that preceded it. More complete, perhaps, in the specific way of things that have been maintained across very long periods. The surface that becomes, through the maintenance, more perfect than the original, because the maintenance has addressed every imperfection that the original contained and has produced, in the addressed version, something that is more total than the thing it began as. She received the tribute. She said the words that the occasion required. She presented the award for which she had been asked to be present. And then she walked off the stage. She was dying. Not in the metaphorical sense. Not in the way that aging is a form of dying that applies to everyone in the auditorium and to everyone watching on television and to everyone who exists and who is therefore in the process of dying from the moment of the beginning, which is the sense in which the word dying is sometimes used to mean simply living in the direction of death. In the specific medical sense, there was something in her body that was progressing, that had been diagnosed, that was doing what it was doing in the way of diseases that do what they do regardless of what the person in whom they are doing it has decided about the doing. She had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer. The people in the Pasadena Civic Auditorium did not know. The people watching on television did not know. The press who would write about the appearance the following day did not know. She had not told them. She had walked onto the stage and she had given the world Loretta Young, the complete, perfectly maintained, warm and composed, and elegantly dressed version of Loretta Young that the world had been receiving since the early 1930s. And she had gone home. Tonight, my friend, I want to tell you the full story. Not the Emmy night story, though the Emmy night is where the story ends in its most visible form. The full story. The story of who Loretta Young was, and what the 60 years had been, and what the practice of maintaining the version across those 60 years had required and cost, and produced and concealed, and why the Emmy night of September the 17th, 1989 was not an exception to the practice but its final and most complete expression. Come with me. We are going back to the beginning, and the beginning is not Hollywood. The beginning is Salt Lake City, Utah, in the year 1913, which is the beginning that the mythology of Loretta Young tends to pass through quickly in its movement toward the Hollywood years that the mythology is organized around, and which requires, for the honest account of the life, the attention that the honest account always requires of the things that produce what the subsequent years produced. Gretchen Michaela Young was born on the 6th of January 1913 in Salt Lake City, Utah. She was the third of 4 daughters born to John Earl Young and Gladys Royal Young. The family was Catholic. In Salt Lake City, Utah, in 1913, being Catholic was the specific form of being not the majority that the predominantly Mormon city produced for the minority tradition, and the quality of being in a place while being slightly outside the dominant form of the place's self-understanding is a quality that tends to install in the people who experience it a specific awareness of the relationship between belonging and not belonging, that the people who simply belong do not develop in the same way. Her father left when she was 3 years old. He left in the specific way of men who leave families, without drama, without the single event that can be named and dated as the departure, simply through the accumulation of absence that the people left behind experience as the gradual replacement of presence with nothing. He was there, and then he was not there, and the not being there became the condition of the household in the way that conditions become conditions, slowly, and then as if they had always been. She was 3 years old when her father left, and she was 17 years old when she was under contract to Warner Brothers, and she was, in the 14 years between those two facts, the specific kind of child who was being shaped by the specific combination of the paternal absence and the Catholic faith and the specific ambitions of a mother who understood that Los Angeles was a place where things were possible that were not possible in Salt Lake City. Gladys Young moved the family to Los Angeles. The move was the move of a woman who has assessed the situation and has understood that the situation requires a different geography, and who has acted on the understanding with the practical efficiency of a woman who does not have the resources to be inefficient about the actions that the situation requires. She moved the daughters to Los Angeles. She found work. She found the specific network of people who were in the business of the Los Angeles entertainment industry and who were therefore in the business of recognizing the specific qualities that the industry could use and directing those qualities toward the uses the industry had available for them. Gretchen Young had the qualities. She had the face, the specific quality of a face that the camera would find, that the camera would love, in the specific way that the camera loves faces that give it something to work with, that give it the interior life behind the surface that the camera's most committed love requires. She had the manner. She had, from the beginning, a quality of composed self-possession that was unusual in a child of her age, and that the people who observed her in the early professional context consistently remarked on. Not the composed self-possession of a child who has been instructed in its performance, but the composed self-possession of a child who is, in some fundamental dimension of herself, certain about something in a way that the certainty does not require external confirmation. She was in films by the time she was 4 years old. Child work in the silent cinema of the mid-1910s was the specific kind of work that the growing film industry of Los Angeles produced in quantity, and that the children of the families who had moved to Los Angeles for the specific purpose of the film industry were the natural supply for. She was one of those children. She was in the work before she was old enough to have made a professional decision about being in it, in the way of children whose professional lives begin as the extensions of their parents' decisions, and that become, gradually, their own. She was Loretta Young by the time she was 15. The name was given to her by the director Mervyn LeRoy, who called her Loretta after the actress Loretta Oliver, because the name Gretchen was the name of the character type that German fairy tales had made generic, and that the American commercial cinema of the late 1920s did not find useful. She took the name. She became it. The process of becoming Loretta Young from Gretchen Young is the specific process that the Hollywood of the late 1920s applied to the raw material that arrived in it, in the form of young people with the specific qualities the industry could use, and that produced in the people who underwent it the specific relationship to their own identity that the process of becoming someone else in the context of a professional career that is organized around performing creates. She had been performing since she was 4 years old. She had been Loretta Young since she was 15. The gap between those two facts, between the beginning of the performance and the beginning of the name under which the performance was organized, is the gap in which the specific quality of Loretta Young's relationship to the public version of herself was established. She understood from very early that the public version was constructed rather than simply expressed, and that the construction was the work, and that the work was both genuine and deliberate, and that both the genuineness and the deliberateness were required. The career of the 1930s and 1940s was the career that the construction was in the service of. She made films. She made many films. The output of a contract player at a major studio in the studio system's peak decades is the output of someone who is working in the specific industrial sense of regular, sustained professional engagement, rather than in the selective, artistic sense of the performer who waits for the right material. She worked steadily, with the professional consistency of someone who takes the work seriously and who gives it what it requires, across the full range of the genres that the 1930s and 1940s Hollywood produced. She was good at what she did. This requires saying directly, because the specific quality of her career, the duration, the consistency, the specific commercial reliability can be received as a form of professionalism without artistic distinction, as the career of a studio player rather than the career of a genuine performer. She was a genuine performer. The specific quality of warmth and emotional accessibility, and the particular kind of composed elegance that she brought to the roles, was not the manufactured product of studio management, but the genuine expression of a person who had found, in the performance of those qualities, the form in which her specific gifts were most fully and most honestly available. The Academy Award confirmed this in 1948. The Farmer's Daughter, in which she played Katrin Holstrom, the Swedish farm girl who becomes a congressional candidate, was the film that the Academy recognized as the expression of what 20 years of serious professional work had produced. She won against Rosalind Russell, Joan Crawford, Susan Hayward, and Dorothy McGuire. She received the Oscar with the composure that the surface of her life always presented, and with the specific quality of genuine feeling that the surface was managing rather than suppressing. The two things were not in opposition. The composure was the form in which the genuine feeling was expressed rather than the substitute for it. She was a Catholic. I have said this already, and I need to say it again at greater length, because the faith is not the biographical detail that the accounts of her career treat it as. The color note about her personal life that provides texture to the professional story. The faith was the organizing principle. The faith organized the daily life, the professional decisions, the personal relationships, the specific understanding of what was owed to the world and what was owed to the self and what was owed to God in the specific theological framework of mid-20th century American Catholicism. She was the Catholic in the complete sense, not the cultural Catholic whose Catholicism is the inheritance of a family tradition and the occasional practice of the sacraments, but the Catholic whose faith is the daily condition of the interior life and whose relationship to the faith is the relationship of something genuinely held rather than periodically consulted. She prayed in the morning. She attended Mass. She had a chapel in her home. The chapel was not the gesture of a wealthy woman toward the trappings of piety. It was the practical provision of the environment in which the daily practice of the faith was conducted, in the way of someone who understands that the environment in which a practice is conducted affects the quality of the practice and who has organized the environment accordingly. She was the woman whose faith was private in the sense of being genuinely interior rather than performed for public consumption, and public in the sense of being acknowledged and not concealed. But the specific nature of what the faith required of her and what she had done in the specific context of the faith's requirement was the thing that the management of the public and the private had been organized around since 1934. Clark Gable. The three words that the full account of Loretta Young requires, and that the full account of Loretta Young has been organizing around since I began this story, because the three words are the specific fact that the practice of maintaining the public version and the private version had been most comprehensively organized around managing, and that the management is the story. She met Clark Gable in 1934. They made Call of the Wild together. The film was shot on location in Washington State, in the specific conditions of a location shoot in the mid-1930s, remote from the studio, remote from the institutional oversight that the studio environment produced, in the specific conditions of a crew of people living and working in close proximity for an extended period in a place that was not their ordinary place. He was 33. She was 21. He was married to Josephine Dillon, from whom he was separated in the process of the divorce that would be formalized in the following year. She was Loretta Young, which she had been for 6 years, which meant she was both the young woman she was and the public figure she had become, in the specific combination that public figures in their 20s inhabit. She became pregnant. The account of what happened on the Call of the Wild location shoot is the account that the posthumous memoir addressed with the obliqueness that I described earlier, and I want to be precise here because the precision is what the honesty requires. She said in the memoir that what happened was not what she had chosen. She said this without the specific directness that the statement might seem to require, in the specific oblique language of a woman who is saying something for the first time in a document that she has organized to be released after her death, because the saying of it during her lifetime was the version of the saying she was not prepared for. I cannot tell you with the certainty that the telling would require the precise nature of what she meant by not what she had chosen. The account has been interpreted in different ways by different people who have read the memoir and who have brought their own understanding of the available evidence to the interpretation. What I can tell you is what the account says and what it does not say, and I can tell you that the document was prepared and released in the specific way it was prepared and released because the woman who prepared it understood that the full account required this and also required the posthumous distance from which the giving of it was possible. She gave birth to a daughter in November of 1935. The daughter was named Judith. The circumstances of the birth were managed in the specific way of circumstances that are managed by people with resources and with the specific kind of a professional and social network that the Hollywood of the 1930s provided to its established performers for the management of the circumstances that their professional and personal lives produced. The birth was not public. The child was placed in an orphanage for a period. In 1937, Loretta Young adopted a daughter publicly. The adoption was announced. The child appeared in photographs with the mother. The mechanism of the public adoption was the mechanism by which the child became part of the public account of Loretta Young's life. The daughter's father was Clark Gable. Judith grew up in Loretta Young's household. She grew up with Clark Gable's ears, which were among the most recognizable physical features in Hollywood. Large, prominent, the specific physical characteristic that the fan magazines and the photographs had made the identifying marker of the most famous male face in American cinema. The ears on the child were the ears that were visible in the photographs, and that the people who saw the photographs and who saw Judith in person understood as the specific evidence of what the photographs were providing evidence of. Loretta Young managed the evidence by having the child's ears surgically altered. The surgery changed the shape of the ears. The surgery did not change who the father was. She managed the secret for 60 years. This is the specific fact about Loretta Young's relationship to the secret that requires the emphasis of its repetition. 60 years. 60 years of the specific, daily, total practice of maintaining a version of the story that did not include the fact that was most central to the full version of the story. 60 years of being asked about Judith and giving the answer that the managed version of the story permitted rather than the answer that the full version of the story would have required. 60 years of the Catholic woman whose faith organized her life around the specific requirements of the faith, managing the specific fact that the faith's requirements and the fact she was managing were in a relationship of complexity that the faith's framework was required to address, and that the addressing of required from her the specific daily practice of someone who is carrying something and who has organized the carrying around the resources of the faith that was carrying her. Judith learned in 1966. She was 30 years old when she learned, which means she had been living in the specific condition of not knowing for 30 years in the household of the woman who knew and who was her mother and who was not telling her. And the not telling was the condition of the relationship across the 30 years of the growing up. The learning changed the relationship. The accounts of the relationship between Loretta Young and Judith in the years following 1966 are the accounts of a relationship that was navigating the specific complexity of what the learning had produced. The reckoning of the daughter with the concealment. The reckoning of the mother with the learning of the daughter. The specific quality of what a relationship between a mother and a daughter requires when the relationship has been organized around a fact that one party knew and the other did not, and that the knowing party decided to maintain rather than disclose. The relationship survived. The accounts of the people who were close to both women in the years following 1966 and into the subsequent decades describe a relationship that was genuinely maintained. Not without difficulty, not without the specific quality of complexity that the circumstances had produced, but genuinely maintained in the way of relationships between people who love each other and who are navigating the difficulty of the specific thing they are navigating together, rather than in isolation. The Loretta Young Show ran from 1953 to 1961. 9 seasons. The show was built entirely around the specific qualities that she had been developing and maintaining since the 1920s. The elegance, the composure, the warmth, the quality of the woman who is in complete possession of herself in the specific sense of a woman whose relationship to her own public presentation is the relationship of a master to the mastery. Every episode began with the entrance. She came through the double doors in the elaborate gown, spinning in the specific way that had become the show's signature, arriving in the frame with the quality of a woman who has prepared the arrival with total care and who is executing the preparation with total confidence. She won 3 Emmy Awards. The recognition was the recognition of an industry for the specific thing it was looking at, and that it understood as the specific thing it was, not the recognition of a performer who had simply been competent for a long time, but the recognition of a performer who had been excellent in the specific way that the sustained excellence of the form she had mastered produces, and who had been delivering that excellence to the 9 million households that were watching the Loretta Young Show each week across 9 years. She was one of the most watched people in America during the years of the Loretta Young Show. This is not the promotional exaggeration of the studio publicity department. It is the simple arithmetic of the Nielsen ratings of the era, which documented the size of the audience with the specific commercial accuracy of an industry that understood its audience as the resource that its commercial logic required it to measure. 9 million households watching weekly, across 9 years. The accumulation of the watching is the measure of the specific quality of what she was giving the audience, which was Loretta Young, the full, complete, perfectly maintained version in the elaborate gowns, through the spinning entrance, through the double doors, in the dramatic episodes in which she appeared, and the hosting segments in which she introduced them. The show ended in 1961. She was 48 years old. She tried a second television series in the late 1960s, and the second series did not replicate the success of the first, in the way of the second attempts at the thing that succeeded the first time. They are never the same thing because the first time was the specific combination of the person and the moment and the form and the audience, and the second time can only approximate the combination rather than reproduce it. She accepted the approximation and moved on. She moved into the later years with the specific quality of a woman who has completed the professional phase and who is now in the phase that the completion produces. She was in the industry's consciousness as the elder who is invited to the occasions that the industry organizes around its own history. The tributes, the retrospectives, the anniversary events, the specific occasions that the industry holds to acknowledge the people whose presence in it over very long periods represents the form of continuity that the industry requires to understand itself as something more than the current season's output. She appeared at those occasions. She was, at all of them, Loretta Young, the version maintained, the composure intact, the warmth present, the elegance complete. She was this at 80 years old in the way she had been this at 20 years old, with the difference that the maintenance at 80 was the maintenance of something that had been maintained for 60 years and that had therefore become, through the maintenance, more perfectly itself than it had been at 20. The surface that has been refined by 60 years of attention to it. She had the cancer when she walked onto the Emmy stage in 1989. The specific nature of the cancer, ovarian cancer, the specific form that the gynecological cancers take, when they take the form of the cancer that develops in the ovaries, and that has, in the specific medical understanding of both 1989 and the present, the specific quality of the cancer that is often not diagnosed until the advanced stages, because the early stages do not produce symptoms that are easily identified as the symptoms of cancer, rather than the ordinary symptoms of the ordinary difficulties of the female body. She was diagnosed. She organized her relationship to the diagnosis in the way she organized her relationship to everything. Through the faith, through the specific understanding of what the faith required of her in the specific circumstances that the diagnosis had produced, and through the practice of maintaining the version of Loretta Young that the world received and keeping the diagnosis in the version that the world did not receive. She did not tell the world about the cancer. Not in 1989 when the Emmy ceremony required her presence on the stage. Not in the years that followed. Not in the interviews that she gave in those years, which were not numerous but were not none, and which were the interviews of a woman who was maintaining the practice with the same completeness she had always maintained it with. She died on August the 12th, 2000. She was 87 years old. She died at the home of her daughter, Linda Lawson, in Los Angeles, in the presence of the family, in the specific company of the people who loved her in the private sense, rather than in the public sense, in the way of deaths that happen in the private space rather than in the public one. The memoir was published. I'll be seeing you. A personal biography, the document she had prepared for the posthumous release, addressed the Clark Gable question in the specific oblique terms that I have described, and was received as the partial disclosure it was. The disclosure that the woman, who had kept the secret for 60 years, was prepared to offer in the specific form and at the specific time that she had organized the offering around. Now, my friend, I want to sit with you in the full meaning of the Emmy night and the cancer and the 60 years of the practice. She walked onto the stage at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium on September the 17th, 1989, and she was dying, and nobody knew. This was not an exceptional event in the life of Loretta Young. It was the expression, in its most concentrated and most literal form, of the practice that had organized her public life since the beginning. She had been walking into public spaces with things that nobody knew for 60 years. The things had been different at different times. The pregnancy in 1934, the secret of Judith's parentage, the specific facts of the interior life that the public version was organized around not revealing. The cancer was the final thing, and she managed it with the same completeness that she had managed everything else. The faith sustained the managing sustained the faith. The two were not separate. The faith was the resource for the carrying of the thing that was being carried, and the carrying of the thing was the specific form of the faith in practice. She was not denying the diagnosis. She was not pretending to herself that the cancer was not there. She was doing what she had understood the faith to require of her in the specific circumstances of her specific life. She was maintaining the version that the world received, and she was keeping in the private space the things that the private space was for, and she was doing both with the total commitment of someone for whom the distinction between the public and the private was not a convenience, but a principle. She had the Oscar, she had the 3 Emmys, she had the 60 years of the career and the 9 million households watching and the standing ovation in Pasadena in 1989, and the specific quality of a public life sustained at a level of excellence and consistency that the entertainment industry produces rarely enough that the rarity is itself the achievement. She also had the secret of Judith's parentage for 60 years. She had the cancer for the years between the diagnosis and the death. She had the specific weight of the thing she was carrying across the full duration of the carrying, and the carrying was the practice, and the practice was the life. And on the Emmy stage in September of 1989, she was doing what she had always done, giving the world the full, complete, perfectly maintained version and keeping everything else in the place where she had always kept it, which was the place where the cameras did not go and the audience did not reach and the press did not know and the millions watching could not see. She gave it to the end. The practice held. The version held. The faith held. Until August the 12th, 2000, when the holding stopped. Sleep well, my friend. And the next time you see the spinning entrance, the double doors, the elaborate gown, the composed arrival, the full and complete and perfectly maintained version, see what is behind it. She kept it there for 87 years. She was very good at keeping things there. It was the practice of her life, and she practiced it until she could not practice it anymore.